The first thing she ever said that cut me wasn't shouted. It was whispered. "Daniel, you'd embarrass me." The words weren't angry. They were delivered the way someone explains why they don't wear a certain pair of shoes anymore. Practical, dismissive, final. But for me, standing in the doorway of our shared bedroom, it landed like a wrench to the chest. Victoria was adjusting a diamond earring in the mirror, gown shimmering under the warm light. She looked like she belonged in the kind of painting you see behind velvet ropes. I looked like I belonged in my garage, grease still under my nails from the '67 Camaro I'd been tinkering with all afternoon. Maybe that was her point. We'd been together 3 years. Engaged for 6 months. I thought we knew each other inside and out. Then came the country club. $50,000 to join, $1,200 a month to stay. She called it an opportunity. I called it another world. Suddenly, her weekends filled with charity luncheons and wine tastings. Her voice changed when she said the names of her new friends, the syllables drawn out as if they tasted expensive. I didn't complain. I had my truck, my tools, my fishing trips. I figured she'd have her scene and I'd have mine. But that night, as she got ready for a gala, I finally asked when I'd get to meet the people she'd been spending every weekend with. That's when she told me, plain as day, that I'd never fit in. That my job, my words, my hobbies, were the kind of things people like her new circle would laugh at. I remember staring at her in silence, counting all the contradictions. The ring on her hand bought with the money from my embarrassing work. The roof over her head, the house I inherited from my grandmother, where every creak in the floor carried a memory. I thought about the meals I'd cooked when she worked late, the oil stains she hated but tolerated on my shirts, the promises we'd made when life felt simple. All of it dismissed with a whisper. "Understood," I told her. "That's all. No shouting, no begging. Just one word." She mistook my calm for agreement and turned back to her mirror. What she didn't know, what she'd never bothered to ask, was that the club she idolized carried my family's name in its foundation. My father had poured 30 years of his life into that place. He saw prestige in fairways and marble floors. I saw ghosts of arguments, his constant disappointment that I'd chosen a life of engines and grease instead of boardrooms. I never wanted his world, never even set foot there after his funeral. Until now. Her dismissal didn't just bruise my pride. It struck something deeper, something waiting to be unearthed. By the time the door closed behind her that night, I'd already made the decision. She wanted distance. What she was about to get was the truth. The house was quiet after she left, too quiet. Usually when Victoria went out, she'd send me a picture from the event, something posed and glamorous, followed by a string of texts about how exhausting networking was. That night, nothing. Just the echo of her words rattling around my head. Embarrassing. I tried to lose myself in work. Rolled the Camaro out under the floodlight, cranked the radio, and pulled off the carburetor I'd been meaning to clean. But every socket wrench click seemed to tighten something in my chest instead. I wasn't angry in the way people expect, no urge to smash glass or curse her name. It was colder than that. A kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I thought about the version of me she wanted, someone who nodded at wine pairings, who owned cufflinks instead of socket sets. A man fluent in portfolios and polo. That wasn't me. I could wear the clothes, learn the lingo, but it would always be a costume. And she didn't even want the effort, she wanted me invisible. That's when I picked up the phone. My sister's number sat in my contacts like a relic. Eleanor and I had spoken only in fragments since Dad died. She ran the club with the precision of a surgeon, while I kept to my garage. Our lives had diverged, but the bloodline tied us in knots either of us fully untangled. The line rang twice. "Daniel?" Her voice was cautious, surprised. "Hey, Ellie. It's been a while." A pause, then a wary laugh. "What's broken that you actually need me?" "Not broken. I need to come to the club." Another pause, longer this time. The kind where you can hear the weight of 10 years pressing through silence. "You hate that place." "I know. But I need to be there Saturday. The hospital fundraiser. Full treatment. Valet, staff, everything. I could almost see her leaning back in her office chair, calculating. This about your fiancé? She asked. Of course she knew. Eleanor oversaw membership approvals. She had stamped Victoria's application herself. Yeah, I admitted. It's about time she met the real me. There was no scolding, no lecture. Just the faint sound of papers shifting. I'll make the calls. But Daniel, once you walk back in, people will talk. You ready for that? I'm ready. When I hung up, the Camaro sat half assembled, parts gleaming under the floodlight. For years I'd stayed in my lane, happy to live quietly with grease-stained hands. But she had forced me to look in a mirror I'd avoided, the son of a man who built empires in fairways, the reluctant heir who wanted no crown. Saturday wasn't about revenge. At least that's what I told myself. It was about truth. About showing Victoria the man she underestimated, blue-collar hands, country club bloodline, and all. And deep down I knew, after Saturday, nothing between us would survive unchanged. The night of the fundraiser, the club's front drive glittered with imported cars, their polished chrome catching the chandeliers that spilled light from the entrance. I pulled in behind the line of sedans and sports cars with my old F-250, paint sun-faded, engine grumbling like a war drum. Heads turned as if someone had parked a tractor at the opera. The valet jogged forward, but instead of the forced politeness I expected, his face lit up. Mr. Fitzgerald, welcome back. He practically bowed as he took the keys. Inside, the staff straightened when they saw me. Old faces from my childhood, bartenders, managers, servers who'd worked under my father, offered warm greetings. For years I had avoided this place, but tonight it felt like a stage set for something I couldn't walk away from. The ballroom swelled with chatter, champagne flutes clinking, a string quartet weaving through the hum. I scanned the crowd until I saw her. Victoria, radiant in emerald silk, surrounded by her circle. She laughed too loudly at something her boss said, one manicured hand resting on a board member's wife's shoulder. To them, she was polished perfection. To me, she was the woman who told me to stay home because I wasn't fit to stand at her side. Danny Fitzgerald! The booming voice cut through the music. Heads turned as Douglas Whitmore, my father's old friend and the current board president, strode over. He wrapped me in a bear hug that startled half the room. Thought you'd sworn off this place, the crowd murmured. My last name carried weight here, and suddenly the introductions began. Douglas led me from group to group, each greeting wrapped in recognition. You remember Tom's son, Daniel? He owns the place now. Every handshake, every nod, every whispered repetition of owns the place spread like a fuse across the ballroom. Eyes shifted toward me, some curious, some calculating. And then I saw her face. Victoria's smile cracked, her glass paused midair. She looked as if the floor had tilted beneath her. Her boss leaned close, whispering something, but Victoria didn't answer. She was staring at me, frozen, watching her carefully built world collapse in real time. I made my way toward her, Douglas still at my side. Carol, I said warmly, shaking her boss's hand. Good to see you again. It's been years. Carol blinked. Daniel? Wait, you two know each other? Victoria finally found her voice, brittle as glass. This is my fiancé. The silence that followed was deafening. Carol's eyes widened, the other women exchanging quick looks, calculating what this revelation meant. Douglas, oblivious to the tension, clapped my shoulder. Well, isn't that something? You're marrying one of our newest members. Victoria, you're a lucky woman. Her hand trembled. I need some air, she whispered, fleeing toward the terrace. I didn't follow. Not yet. I let the moment settle, the whispers swell, the truth soak into every corner of the room. The life she wanted was built on status. Tonight she learned that the man she dismissed as beneath her had been standing above her the whole time. The terrace doors swung shut behind her, leaving a ripple of awkward silence in the ballroom. Conversations restarted in lower tones, but the damage was done. Victoria's perfect facade had cracked, and everyone had seen it. I gave her space, choosing instead to mingle. Not out of cruelty, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't satisfaction, but because I needed her to sit with the weight of what she'd said to me. Funny thing happened. The very people she had insisted were too refined for me turned out to be people. One board member asked about my Camaro and ended up telling me about the Mustang he'd been restoring in secret, hiding it from his wife in a rented garage. Another confessed he was clueless about boats and begged for advice before dropping $70,000 on something that would rot at the marina. The mechanics of engines, the smell of oil, the thrill of making something roar back to life, these men hung on every word like kids around a campfire. Meanwhile, across the room, I caught glimpses of Victoria slipping back in, her smile pasted on, eyes darting. Her friends whispered in clusters, some amused, others cautious. She didn't look like she was in control anymore. By the time the auction wound down, my phone buzzed with a string of texts. "We need to talk now. This isn't funny. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel, please answer me." I slid the phone back into my pocket and bid $20,000 on a week-long ski trip I had no intention of taking. The money would go to the children's hospital. At least something good would come out of the evening. When I finally left, the ballroom lights glowed behind me like a theater curtain. I drove home slow, the weight of the night sitting heavy in my chest. I wasn't gloating. Beneath the satisfaction was something sharper, grief. Grief for the life I thought we were building, for the trust that had been so casually broken. She was waiting when I got home, pacing the living room in her gown, mascara streaked down her cheeks. 3 years? She spat, voice shaking. You hid this from me for 3 years. Do you have any idea how humiliated I am? I told everyone you wouldn't fit in and you... She stopped, choking on her own words. I didn't hide anything, I said evenly. You never asked? I told you I was a mechanic, because that's what I am. You own a country club. She shot back, as though the words alone absolved her. I inherited it, I corrected. I don't run it. I don't even like it. But tonight I needed you to see that the only person ashamed of me was you. Her eyes softened for a moment, desperate. We can get past this. I was protecting us both. You know I love you. But even as she said it, I could see the fear behind her gaze, not of losing me, but of losing the world she thought she'd climbed into. That was the moment I knew the real confrontation hadn't even begun. 2 weeks later, I thought the storm had passed. Victoria was quieter, softer even, as if she'd accepted the truth, and we were limping towards some new version of us. But the silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. The next test came at the club gates. I had promised Eleanor I'd stop by before a board meeting to sign some paperwork. I wasn't dressed for the part, work boots, jeans, grease on my hands from the Camaro. I didn't care. When I pulled up, a crowd had gathered just outside the iron gates. Cameras flashed. A local reporter barked questions. For a second, I thought maybe a senator had arrived, some big donor worth fawning over. But then I saw her. Victoria. She stood on the steps, hair perfectly curled, makeup painted into innocence. Her hands rested protectively over her stomach. My stomach dropped before she even spoke. I just wanted to say, she told the cameras, voice trembling with rehearsed fragility. Daniel and I are thrilled to be expecting. We're blessed, and I hope the Fitzgerald family will welcome me not just as his fiancée, but as the mother of his child. A roar of voices followed. Flashes blinded me. My chest went hollow. Pregnant? It wasn't possible. Not unless time worked differently for her than it did for me. I stepped forward, the cameras swinging toward me like searchlights. Victoria, I said low but sharp. What are you doing? Her smile widened, but her eyes begged me to play along. Sweetheart, come stand with me. I didn't move. I looked at her, really looked, and all I saw was someone drowning, not reaching for me, but clawing at the life raft of reputation, status, survival. She had turned me into her prop. The crowd pressed closer. Is it true, Daniel? Are you going to be a father? My hands curled into fists, not from rage but from restraint. This was the final line she had drawn in the sand, daring me to cross. I spoke clearly, every word cutting through the noise. No. She isn't pregnant. And if she were, it wouldn't save what's already broken. Gasps spread like a shockwave. Her face collapsed, shock, then rage, then something like terror. The cameras didn't miss a frame. She lunged toward me, whispering so only I could hear. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined me. I met her eyes steady. No, Victoria. You did that yourself. The security guards moved in, not for me, but to keep the press from storming the gates. Eleanor appeared at my side, her hand light on my shoulder, her presence both anchor and shield. In that instant, with Victoria still trembling on the steps and the cameras eating her alive, I felt the strangest thing: relief. The lie had exploded in front of everyone, and there was no fixing it. The engagement, the pretense, the future she had mapped out, it all ended there, under the white-hot glare of the flashbulbs. And though it broke something inside me, it also set me free. The story didn't vanish with the cameras. For weeks, headlines carried her name and mine, tied together in a narrative neither of us had chosen. The mechanic heir. Society bride exposed. Fitzgerald scandal at the gates. I stayed quiet. I didn't issue statements or fight for my reputation. Truth doesn't need a press release. It just waits steady, while the noise burns itself out. Victoria tried. She fought interviews, denied what had been caught on camera, spun new tales until even her closest friends stopped answering her calls. Eventually she left town, chasing some new city where no one would remember. And maybe that was her way of surviving. For me, survival looked different. I spent mornings at the club with Eleanor, relearning the place I'd abandoned. Not to wear a crown, not to prove anything, but to reconcile with the part of myself I had buried. Afternoons I worked the Camaro, hands stained with oil and steel. In both worlds I found pieces of my father, the empire builder who shook hands in boardrooms, and the man who taught me to fix a carburetor in our driveway. It wasn't about choosing one life over the other anymore. It was about owning all of it. One evening, months later, I walked the club grounds alone. The sun was setting low, painting the greens gold. Families lingered on the terrace, laughter drifting across the lawn. I thought of her then, not with anger, but with the ache of someone you once loved who could never love you back in the way you needed. She wanted the world to see her. I only ever wanted to be seen by her. That difference was enough to break us. I stopped by the gate, the same spot where everything had unraveled. The iron bars gleamed in the last light, silent now, no cameras, no crowd. Just me. I rested a hand on the metal, cold and unyielding. It reminded me of the night I had stood here and chosen truth over performance. Painful as it was, I knew I'd do it again. Because sometimes the only way to honor love is to let it collapse under the weight of its own lies. A breeze carried the scent of cut grass, faint and clean. Somewhere inside, Eleanor's laughter rose above the hum of conversation. I smiled to myself, small but certain. I wasn't the man Victoria wanted me to be. But I was finally the man I could live with. As I turned to leave, the horizon stretched open before me, wide, uncertain, unburdened. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying someone else's expectations. Just my own. And that was enough. I wasn't the man she wanted. But I was still standing. And sometimes survival is its own kind of victory.